welcome back to my YouTube channel. This video is going to be my lecture on chapter 11. There is a lot packed into this lecture. It's attitude and influencing attitude. That was my dog just running by. Okay, let's get started. So we always start with the whole consumer behavior flow chart. We are still in that internal influences box. We haven't moved on yet, but we're just finishing it up with attitudes. So if we start on slide 4, we talk about an attitude. So an attitude is the way one thinks, feels, and acts towards an aspect of their life or their situation. So right now, you could either have a positive attitude, I'm going to get through this, I'm going to get through this semester and everything's going to be okay. Or you could have a negative attitude, oh my God, what am I doing? The world is ending. I like to err on the side of positivity, or at least try to be as close to positivity as I can. But attitude is very important in consumer behavior. So this slide, we're on slide 5. It's figure 11, page 398 in your book. So it's the attitude components and manifestations, and how basically explaining how we get to attitude. So we moving from left to right, or actually this would be your left to right. We move from initiator to component manifest to attitude. Okay, so I'll explain what a few of those things are. Initiator is the stimulus. It's the stimuli. It's what, in the case of marketing, it's the product or service, or the advertising can be a stimulus or a stimuli. Feelings or emotional reactions to an object represent the affective component. I love Pepsi. Like emotionally love. There's lots of brands we love, right? The cognitive component consists of customers' beliefs about an object or brand. So I look at the store or brand Forever 21. So I immediately think young women, trendy clothes, lower price, cool stuff. I get panic sweats because everything's on the floor in that store. I don't know how people shop there, but again, that's the cognitive component to Forever 21. The behavioral component is simple. It's your tendency to buy, right? You buy the product. I will seek out those Pepsi products and purchase them. Very simple, okay? So we're going to skip over slide 6. We're going to move on to 7, and we're going to talk about attitude components. So this just kind of pulls out affective, cognitive, and behavioral again. Affective, I love Pepsi. Cognitive, it tastes good, it's sweet, it's bubbly. Behavioral, I seek out Pepsi products. That's it. Just a representation of attitude components. Attitude components. So the component consistency. So slide 8, there's a lot of information for slide 8. Okay, so this is where I'm going to walk through all 6 factors. So you may need to pause me or whatever you need to do, but that's what we'll do here. This is all on page 404 in your book. So if you don't quite catch everything I'm giving you, check the book. It lays this out really, really well. So the example they use in the book is the iPhone, and I think it's a really good example. It applies to a lot of the inconsistencies here. So if you look at lack of need, so I'm not going to go hard on giving you definitions. I'm going to talk more about the example. So a consumer may not feel the need for a smartphone, or might have a less preferred brand or an older model. So they may just not have the need for that iPhone. Okay, so that's pretty simple. The customer might not have enough money to buy an iPhone, so they buy a less expensive brand. So that's lack of ability. iPhones are like $1 jillion now. It's understandable. Number 3, failure to consider relative attitudes. So purchases involve trade-offs, really, if you think about it, right? A consumer might really, really like Apple products because it's not just the iPhone. They have laptops. There's lots of different products, right? But they have an even higher opinion of Samsung products, and they decide to get a Galaxy phone, right? So there's really not, they still like the brand, but they decided they liked another brand more, okay? So attitude ambivalence, number 4. I love the example the book gave. It made me laugh. I have to read it because it's just funny. Seafood. Sometimes seafood tastes good. Sometimes it's bad. So I guess they're talking about like sushi from a gas station versus sushi from a nice restaurant. I don't know. Basically, with attitude ambivalence, the attitude is less stable over time, and it's difficult to protect. So you have kind of a wishy-washy feeling about a product or service, right? So, I could be in the mood for seafood, drive by Red Lobster, and roll up to Red Lobster, right? Which, that doesn't sound like something I would do, but you get my point. The 5th one, weakly held beliefs and effect, is really the reason companies spend money on advertising. They spend money on coupons and free samples. It's why advertising and all those things exist, right? Because that tries to get people to make that purchase of that, especially that new product. I've told you the examples. You walk by the freezer case at Wegmans on a Sunday or a Saturday, and they're having you try new ice cream flavors, right? They have the cooler right there underneath. You try it, you like it, you grab it, you buy it. That's it. All of a sudden, now I have a new ice cream flavor I like. Failure to consider interpersonal influence, so that's number 6. An example of this would be, say the company you work for issues you a cell phone, and it's a Samsung Galaxy. You get used to using it, and you just become an Android user. So there's nothing you as a consumer really, it's just something that you're used to using because your work bought that for you. So that's a situational influence. Brands really can't do much about that. Okay? So there's a lot on this slide. So I want you to spend a little time. It's on page 404. They kind of break this out as well. So if we take a look at change strategies, good marketers try to influence consumer behavior by changing attitude components. They want to change your attitude about the brand or the service. Okay? That gets you to buy things. That gets that behavior changed. So cognitive and affective components, there's a lot of information here. The information on slide 9 is all on pages 405 through 408. Okay, so take a look through that. But I can run through the 4 basic marketing strategies within changing the cognitive components. So there's changing beliefs. So Target, we think of Target, right? They're a great example for a lot of things. They made a shift to become more of a boutique-like store. They sell brands like Magnolia Home, which is that Chip and Joanna Gaines from HGTV. That's their brand, okay? They work with those Hunter brand boots. They've worked with Isaac Mizrahi on various, and he's a fashion designer. They work with Christian, I think it was Christian Siriano. Now I can't remember, but I know it was Isaac Mizrahi. There's tons of them. So they started working with different designers to give more of a boutique vibe for Target. So they're trying to get you to change your view. Okay? Second is shifting importance. So think about those OnStar commercials. The one that comes to mind is the woman who's driving, gets in an accident, and OnStar immediately goes on. They immediately send people her way. And in using that, that immediate response is what GM wants you to focus on. They're trying to use that service as a differentiator from, say, buying a Nissan or a Toyota. Third of the 4 basic marketing strategies for cognitive components would be adding new beliefs. So adding new beliefs to the consumer's belief structure is hard. It's why the American Egg Board promotes eggs having 6 grams of high quality protein, 0 carbs, 0 sugar. Eggs are a health food. When I was a kid, eggs were considered high in fat, high in cholesterol. I think that's when egg beaters, they're not fake eggs, but they're just like egg whites. That's when people started only eating egg whites. So the Egg Board decided to kind of repackage eggs, showcasing their better qualities. And so that gets you to start thinking, oh, all right, so what I'm eating is healthier for me than I thought. So the 4th and final strategy for changing the cognitive component is to change the perception of the ideal brand or situation. So different conservation organizations like the Sierra Club, for example, not existence, good Lord. I have to learn how to edit these because then you'd notice I make no mistakes. But then it wouldn't be authentic. Laugh track. So they work to change our minds regarding using recycled materials, using minimal packaging. It's why companies like Rothy's and Allbirds exist. It's why Dunkin' Donuts changed to recyclable coffee cups. Rothy's and Allbirds, for some of you out there that may not have heard of those 2 companies, they make shoes out of recycled plastic. I have not bought them. I'm tempted. So that might be a good project for me. See how those look. Let's see. I've got a lot more. Changing the affective component. So companies try to make you not just like them, but love them. Okay? Marketers for the affective component use 3 basic approaches to directly increase effect. So first is classical conditioning. So we spoke about classical conditioning in chapter 9. I don't know if you remember all the way to chapter 9, because it literally does feel like the last couple weeks has been 2 years. It's basically using a stimulus that the audience likes to promote the brand. So using music, pictures. Think about those iPhone commercials that I love so much. They're bright, they're cheery, there's cool music, there's dancing. So that's classical conditioning. The second approach, we're still on slide 9, by the way. The second approach is the effect towards the ad or website. So chapter 10 told us that liking an ad generally gives us a positive attitude towards the brand. That makes sense, right? Humor, celebrities, emotional appeals. Ads that have a negative effect can change attitude. So some of you in your comments from the last video talked about the SPCA ads or the Sad Doggy ads with the Sarah McLachlan song. I should be playing that right now, but I don't understand copyrights with YouTube. Anyway, so St. Jude Children's Hospital, that's another one. You see those commercials, you see the really, really cute sick kids, and yeah, it works. You donate, okay? The third approach is to directly increase effect is exposure. That's easy, right? Familiarity breeds liking. So it's why companies don't just run an ad once or twice. It's why ads run on different types of media. There is such a thing as running an ad too much. But you think of brands, the tried and true brands like Coke, like Pepsi, like General Motors, different brands like that, they continue to run ads, right? you know those brands, but they continue to run ads so they stay in your mind. Okay? So the final attitude change strategy is the behavioral component. What's behavior? It's the purchase or use of the product or service. So I bought glasses on Zenny.com. I uploaded a picture of myself to try them on. Worked like a charm. Other things like coupons, free samples, point of purchase displays, all of that stuff changes behaviors, gets people to buy or try things. Okay? And that's what they want them to do. So let's move on to slide 10. Slide 10 is the ELM model, the Elaboration likelihood model. So that's a theory about how attitudes are formed and changed under varying conditions of involvement. This is on page 410. It's 11-3. So ELM suggests that involvement is key. Okay, so low involvement and high involvement. So on the left is high involvement, on the right is low. Involvement is what? Customer involvement. What do you think a high customer involvement purchase would be? What would a low customer involvement purchase be? So, if we move on to slide 11, the next few, I think it was two slides, talk about core tenets of ELM. And basically, with ELM, it breaks out low versus high involvement purchases. Okay, so the first one basically talks about compared to attitudes formed under the peripheral root, otherwise known as low involvement purchases. Formed under the central root or high involvement purchases tend to have stronger core tenets, more resistance to counter-persuasion attempts or advertising, more resistance to advertising. They live in your brain, so they're more accessible from memory. They're more predictive of behaviors. So for myself, I always buy Chevys. Okay, that's just a brand that's in there. My dad worked for GM. I tend to always get Chevys. And it's a high involvement purchase because buying a car is a high involvement purchase. So I have a real strong attachment to the brand. I see other ads for other cars. They're not really going to persuade me. I can literally close my eyes and see the Chevy logo in my head. Okay, so that just talks a little bit about low versus high involvement and what the central root or the central attitudes of high involvement purchases are. So if we move on to slide 12, slide 12 kind of just lays this out. Peripheral cues, PCs, they influence persuasion under low involvement purchases. But you're going to tell me what some of those are. But not high involvement. Central cues influence persuasion under high involvement, but not low. So peripheral cues, we'll talk about in the next slide. Central cues are what we talked about in the slide before. All those strong brand feelings that I have, those strong brand attitudes. Okay? So if we take a look at slide 13, and we talk a little bit, of course, there's a caveat to everything. So they talk about cue relevance. So what is a peripheral cue versus a central cue? So I love this example that they put in the slide for once. It's a decent example. So an attractive model and her hair, so, like all the hair modeling I'm doing in this video, may be decision irrelevant for peripheral cues in an ad for a car, but decision relevant or central cue for shampoo. So that beautiful hair belongs on a Pantene commercial, not a Chevy commercial. So you want to see Selena Gomez walking through the meadow, flashing her hair around in her Pantene commercial. You don't need to see her doing a Chevy commercial. So again, the attractive model would influence persuasion under high involvement for shampoos, not for cars. Some people think buying shampoo is a high involvement purchase. Are you that person? I am. So next slide, 14. So competitive situations. So peripheral cues can influence under high involvement in competitive situations when. This one's kind of important. So think about this. You see a lot of car commercials, right? Or a lot of digital ads for cars, especially if you're looking for a car, right? They figure that out and then they just start showing you lots of different ads. So they start to look the same, don't they? They're either driving through a desert, they're driving in the neighborhood, it's the same type of vibe, right? The typical same song, very similar voiceover, you hear the deal at the end, 0% APR financing, all that stuff. So it's monotony, right? You hear the same thing over and over again. So sometimes those central cues get neutralized due to seeing very similar ads if you don't have that real strong brand attachment. Attribute trade-offs across central cues, that's what helps. So if I'm really looking for something that is all-wheel drive or has heated seats, little flashy things like that, that's when I start to pay attention. Okay? So this part of the chapter is really talking about high involvement purchases versus low involvement purchases, and what are our attitudes towards both. So consumer resistance to persuasion. There's a lot of people, when I've been in sales and I've spoken with a lot of people that are like, I just don't want to be sold something. I want to make my own decision. Well, if you think about it, we're selling things all day, every day. We sell ourselves just walking down the hall at school. We sell ourselves in a job interview. So selling is a part of this. Advertising is a part of everything. So number one, we're skeptical consumers. Okay? Does anyone remember the Nutella commercial that was out? I don't know, maybe it was a year ago or 2 years ago. Basically, Nutella was saying that it was good. It was a good, healthy breakfast to have chocolate hazelnut spread on your piece of toast in the morning. Now, I know I have probably questionable nutrition choices, but that didn't get by me. So we're skeptical, we resist persuasion, right? We try. And the third is we avoid messages that counter our attitudes. So, if you're a smoker, you're gonna turn away when the quit smoking commercials come on, or like lots of different things. If you're someone that has a drinking problem, they have all those different PSAs on TV. There's just a million things that we turn off because our attitudes are very different. We're skipping slide 16. We're moving on to slide 17. And there's 3 types of communication characteristics. We will discuss source characteristics over the next few slides. Appeal characteristics represent the how, right? Is it fear? Is it humor? How are we getting this point across? The third is the message structure characteristic. So is it a one-sided or a two-sided message? Is it negative or positive framing? So we'll be talking about that within the next few slides. So if we move on to slide 18, you talk about source credibility. It's why Quaker Oats has the American Heart Association seal, right? Oatmeal is high in fiber and good for you, okay? But we're skeptical. We don't always believe what ads tell us, so they went out and got the American Heart Association seal. Celebrity sources. I don't even really probably need to talk about this, but think about it. I mean, LeBron for Nike, Gigi Hadid for Tommy Hilfiger, Puma and Rihanna, H&M, David Beckham. I mean, celebrities are very effective in marketing anything. Sponsorships. So sponsorships are very similar to celebrity endorsers. Monster Energy drinks typically sponsor NASCAR. Coke sponsors the FIFA World Cup. Coke is also sponsoring the now postponed Tokyo Olympic Games. I'm not exactly sure what's going to be happening with a lot of those sponsorship deals. I would assume that, you know, they're probably trying to figure that stuff out right now. So we're moving on to slide 19, and we're talking about celebrity sources a little bit more. You can read that. It's all, the next slide just drills down on celebrity sources widely used. So to me, my question for you is, who are some celebrity sources that you're familiar with or who you'd listen to? We're going to skip slide 20. We're going to talk about slide 21, and it's just kind of matching endorser with product and target audience. So it's why Burger King canceled talks with Paris Hilton to be their exclusive endorser. I would never put Paris Hilton together with Burger King. But you know what? Sometimes odd pairings match. You know, they mix well, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. It's like, you know, Snoop Dogg and Martha Stewart. Who would have thought? But I guess it works. Slide 22. We talk about appeal characteristics. So we talk about fear, the quit smoking commercials. Humor, the Snickers commercials. Are you hungry? You need a Snickers? Doritos, the Rocket Mortgage, Jason Momoa commercial that I forced you all to watch. Comparative ads. There have been ads comparing Whopper to a Quarter Pounder. Emotional appeals. So emotional appeals, that's another good question. Can you give me an example of an ad that has an emotional appeal? Value expressive versus utilitarian, we'll talk about in the next slide, slide 23. So value expressive appeals build a personality for a product or a brand. So if I was to say Mountain Dew, you could come up with kind of a personality for that brand. Energy, buzzy, lots of sugar. Doritos, same thing. You know, youthful, snacky. Utilitarian. So that's when you focus on functional benefits, right, that are important to that target market. So like for me, I look at a Swiffer commercial, or when they talk about the Swiffer wet jet, I'm like, oh yeah, I need to get one of those. That would probably be helpful. Nobody likes to mop. And that's how they frame their commercials. Nobody likes to mop, right? So that's really all value expressive versus utilitarian is. Moving on to slide 24. One-sided, so one point of view expressed versus two-sided, so both good and bad points presented. Two-sided messages happen for higher involvement purchases, for homes, for cars. That's when you start to really do more research and you form a different attitude based on learning the good and bad of everything. That tends to lend itself to more educated consumers. Positive versus negative framing we'll talk about in the next slide. Nonverbal components, pictures, right? Background music, people's facial expressions. You know nonverbal components because we've talked about that in a couple chapters. So positive versus negative framing, which I actually do like their examples here, describing beef, ground beef. It's either 80% fat-free or 20% fat. And for some reason, we sell it as 20% fat, or sometimes they'll say 80-20, but that's attribute framing. So only one single attribute focused on at a time. Goal framing, so they use the example of having a yearly mammogram. So there's benefits, right? Staying healthy. And then they also talk about the risks of not having a mammogram. So that's a negative thing, but it's something that will hopefully get someone to get their yearly mammogram. So our final slide, slide 26, nonverbal components, which we've kind of talked about already. That can influence attitudes through affect cognition or both. Emotional ads tend to rely on nonverbal components. Think about the music. Think about the music that plays during an emotional ad. You all know the songs. So that was chapter 11. attitude. Please leave me a note or a comment below answering some of my questions or making some comments about the chapter in itself. That's it. You'll have a couple more lectures coming down the road, and if you need me, you know how to reach me. Be safe, be well, and we'll talk soon. Bye.